just had some fantastic and brilliant programs since we started in 2015. So obviously we pivoted in this historical moment, and we are doing our weekly chopping it up with MoAD every Friday, or most Fridays. I'm so excited to invite our guest this week. Linda Shiue, MD, has been so instrumental in getting more of the medical institutions thinking about the role of prevention, thinking about the role of food and the way in which it can be used as medicine, which seems pretty intuitive, but I think the medical establishment has lost sight of that. And it's physicians like Linda and institutions like Kaiser who understand the ways in which we need to be thinking about preventing chronic illnesses, doing as much as we can as possible. And food is one way in which we can take control of our health. So I am going to tell you a little bit about Linda, and then I will invite her on. Linda Shiue is a physician, chef, and founder of Thrive Kitchen at Kaiser Permanente in San Francisco, a teaching kitchen for patients. She believes that the best medicine is prevention. Ashe. Her cooking classes showcase seasonal produce, lavishly flavored with spices and fresh herbs. Her food writing has been published widely, and she has been interviewed frequently on television and in print. Dr. Shiue has served as faculty at University of California, San Francisco, Stanford University, and she serves on the board of the San Francisco-Marin Food Bank. She's a graduate of Bryant University, San Francisco Cooking School, UCSF, and the kitchen of Michelin-starred restaurant Mourad in San Francisco. She's also had a certificate in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University, and Dr. Shiue has a cookbook coming out in 2021 called Spice Box Kitchen, and she's actually working with Renee Sedliar, who is my former editor. She edited my first solo book, Vegan Soul Kitchen. So I'm going to invite Dr. Shiue.
Hey, Bryant. Good to
Hi,
see you.
Linda. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, I was going to say that I forgot to thank our sponsor, Kaiser Permanente, but this interview is all about Kaiser Permanente.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you.
Great to see you too. Are you in your home kitchen?
Yeah. Yes, I had it set up so you could see the kitchen.
It's a beautiful kitchen. I love it. Did you have it renovated recently? A lot of that looks new back there.
No, not that recently.
Okay.
But, showing the pot rack so that people will be inspired to cook their dinner.
No doubt, no doubt. You want them to cook tonight? Is that a good idea?
Every night if possible.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on just like from scratch cooking? I have my own thoughts about from scratch home cooking. Yeah, give us some thoughts in a culture and a moment where a lot of people are eating out, ordering out, and and pre-COVID eating out. What are your thoughts about making food at home?
I mean, my wish is that everybody will want to cook often at home, but the starting point should be wherever they are. So if someone doesn't cook at all, which isn't really that possible these days during COVID, to start cooking once and then once a week maybe. But for people who know how to cook and maybe just forgot or fell out of habit with it, just start cooking more often. And I like to keep it really simple. It doesn't have to be fancy. I think fancy is great sometimes for a dinner party, which we can't really do now anyway. But the kind of cooking that I really encourage people to do, that I teach in my classes and that I have recipes for in my cookbook are the kind that you can get done in under an hour, maybe even half an hour at home, because then I think it's possible. And any cooking that people do from scratch is going to be better for health than what you're going to get takeout or going out to a restaurant.
Yeah. Tell me what's your go-to, or like you have two or three go-to quick meals. You need to get something on the table quickly. The kids are hungry and you just got to
Yeah.
bang it out. Tell us about that.
Oh, it, I have so many really that it's hard to really name a few, but I think kind of it's more the technique. So something like a stir fry or saute is a really quick thing to do. Something involving, I think plant-based proteins like tofu or beans can be put together really quickly. And certainly pasta or noodle dishes or rice or other grain dishes are things that you can, pre-prep some ingredients like the grains or the rice in advance and then kind of throw together with what you happen to have.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that. One thing that we try to do on the weekends
Mm-hmm.
is do a lot of prep for the week. And
Yeah.
so, going to the farmer's market in better days and
Yeah.
getting a lot of produce and then just
Yeah.
like, cleaning it, chopping it up, putting it in a container. So, like you said, those are some of the go-tos for us as well. It's like
Yeah.
vegetable stir fries, soup noodles. So really all we need to do is like maybe blanch some vegetables, quickly saute them, and then we're eating within like 45 minutes.
Right. I'm also a really big proponent of reconsidering leftovers as actually prep, as pre-seasoned food that already has flavor that you can then turn into something else that's new. A lot of people don't like leftovers, but I hope to change people's ideas about that. So, for example, if you have some leftover or pre-prepped roasted vegetables, those can be used for any number of dishes in totally different ways just by changing up the seasonings, right? Changing the spices or maybe with whatever condiments you use.
Mm-hmm.
So in this way, I think people can get their minds around cooking every day without actually having to do the whole thing every day.
Yeah. All right. So you open up your refrigerator. You have some leftover roasted carrots. They have
Yeah.
some fresh herbs on there, and you need to transform that into a quick dish. What do you do with
Yeah.
it?
So it can be anything. I mean, that can go into a noodle dish. It can go into a rice dish. It can be part of a sandwich, kind of, or even a salad. It can go into really anything at all. And again, it's all about just changing the flavorings that you use with it to make it something new.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back. I don't know if I told you, but my sister is a medical doctor.
You mentioned
And
that. Yeah.
and so one thing that she has been very critical of is the, I guess, inaction of a lot of medical schools, at least when she was in medical school. I think there
Mm-hmm.
is a sea change happening as
Mm-hmm.
far as I know. But, back then, I think she said they took an 8-hour nutrition class.
Mm-hmm.
They rarely talked about, what or just food in general, talking about food, talking about the ways in which they can learn more about food so that they can help their patients to be living more, healthful and whole lives. And now we know that there are some institutions who are taking the lead and changing that narrative. But tell us, when you were in medical school, what did
Yeah.
you learn about cooking and nutrition and, all the things that you teach about now?
No, I mean, so it was a while ago, but at that time, I probably similar to your sister, I can't remember how many, but a few hours, maybe a dozen hours. I'm not sure exactly how many about nutrition. And I don't remember anything about it now, except that it really wasn't about food. It was more about, nutrients,
Nutrients,
uh,
micronutrients.
micronutrients. So
Mhm.
like vitamins, minerals, all about how like this is what we need when there's a hospitalized patient and they're sick and maybe they need some supplemental nutrition, but it wasn't about food at all and definitely not about cooking, right? So I think in general the public thinks about food a little bit more now than a few decades ago. But in terms of cooking, the actual, how do we make this something that people want to eat? How do we make this something that people can do? Those skills are crucial, and they're still crucial, and there are still people who really need those skills. And that starts with medical students because they're, these are people who, most of them just graduated from college. They might just be coming off a meal plan. Many of them don't know how to cook.
Mhm.
And if the person who's going to become your doctor or who's already on your medical team taking care of you doesn't have that knowledge and actually that deeply held belief that, hey, you can do this, you need to do this, and it's important what you put in your mouth, they're not going to communicate that to their patients. So that has implications both for people who are sick, but also people who are healthy, and you want to keep them that way. So I think it's like crucial. You know, that's one of my favorite things to do besides teaching patients how to cook is teaching medical students. So I do that at least a couple times a year with our local medical students at UCSF. And it's great. Like I actually, you know, I teach them how to make grain bowls because I think that is talking about prep and what you're doing. Yeah. That's a great way for them to feed themselves too, right? So if they do their prep once a week, they're so busy, they're not going to have time to cook really, but they can again mix and match with those components that I teach them how to use. And I also like to say that if it doesn't taste good, no one's going to eat it, even if they know it's good for them. So I'm all about flavor.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I tend to be flavor forward. And, you know, I always say that I don't care how nutritious or ethical or environmentally sustainable the food is. If it isn't delicious, most people don't want it. But if you start with the flavor, then I think people are more open to hearing about like the other benefits that the food might have. Do you agree?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, your recipes are great. You're definitely flavor forward in ways which, you know, I don't know that you started out saying I'm going to make a healthy cookbook, but because your vegan cookbooks are all, you know, it's all vegetables and you lead with flavor, it is actually already a good health plan for people to cook your recipes, right? So that's kind of been my approach too, because I know that, you know, all of us go through cycles where we might eat great sometimes and not so great at other times, right? And I know it doesn't work when I wanted to like improve how I'm eating to have food that doesn't appeal to me and that seems like a prescription or is bland or just isn't food that I want to eat. So I think that's really the goal here. First of all, to get people eating more vegetables. Everybody could use more vegetables. And then figure out ways, simple ways, inexpensive ways, flavor forward ways of making it taste good.
Yeah. You know, the thing is, I don't know how you feel about this, but I avoid talking about my food as being healthful. And there are a number of reasons that I do that. And I think one can make an argument for, you know, a plant-forward diet or a plant-centered diet being healthful, especially as compared to the standard American diet. But, you know, I often, when I'm talking about the with, as Michael Pollan describes it, edible food-like substances.
Right.
And so, you know, I've found that framing often invites people in a different way than when you talk about it being like healthful. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts just around like kind of how you frame eating more healthfully, but in a way that doesn't sound so clinical and, you know, transactional.
Right. Well, I'm really grateful to Michael Pollan because I use his phrases all the time, right? So mostly plants is really the way I try to, it's very general, right? But I really try to encourage people to think of it that way. If people, you know, if it's important to people for their taste or their culture or just what they like to eat something that is not a plant, that's fine. And I think what you said about starting with real food is really the key here. So that's the from scratch cooking, getting the best ingredients that you can get, that you're able to get, and starting from scratch because it's going to be much better for you again than anything you're going to get in a package. And so I really like to kind of see where people are with what their diet includes, and then really just start really simply. Like, why don't you add some leafy greens to that? Oh, that's a vegetable you haven't tried before. Why don't you diversify with that? I love the farmer's market because then you get to see what's there. You can talk to people growing the food, connect with them, and you know they'll have ideas on how to prepare that. And so I think just make it fun, exciting, and I agree. You had asked about how do I talk about that and not focus so much on the health. Obviously, as a doctor, people are coming to me for health advice. But I think in talking about food, people don't really want to hear that it's health food because that just has different connotations that aren't that appealing.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about different cultures, and I know you have emphasis on spices, a diverse array of spices to really help build flavor, especially when we're talking about, you know, plant-based cooking. Because, you know, the thing is, I understand the, you know, traditionally in many diets and kind of primal diets. Meat was often used as something to add nutrient density and add flavor. And look, I'm from the South, and I know how like rendered fat can just make dishes so much more flavorful. Or having a piece of fat back in greens, I get it. I'm not going to pretend like, yeah, it doesn't add flavor. It does. But, you have this approach where, you think about using an array of herbs and spices to kind of like build the layers of flavor in vegetable-based dishes. Can you talk about that approach?
Yeah, well, it's because I like a lot of variety myself. And I've been lucky throughout my life to have been exposed to people from all around the world. And in my education, I studied anthropology in college, and I studied abroad actually a few times. I was able to visit a lot of places where people really love spices. It's just kind of normal part of cooking, right? Yeah. So if you're you talk about the standard American diet, we have salt and pepper. And there are other things, but people don't actually often feel that comfortable using other spices. But the great thing with spices is that, the worst thing you can say about them is that you don't like the way that one tasted, but there are so many, and it just brings you to like other parts of the world by trying different spices. Spices were
I'm
also,
sorry. Hold on a second. Hey guys, quiet on the set. I'm filming. You can practice later. Sorry, my daughter, of course, decided to start practicing cello as I'm doing my thing. So anyway.
You don't want to discourage practice, though.
Typically, I would. But, so I'm wondering, we've never talked about this.
Yeah.
But I want to hear your thoughts on this because, I encourage people to think about like the cultural foods that their grandmother and their great grandmother were eating. And, you talk about the kind of array of herbs and spices that we might find in global cuisines. And, I think most people enjoy kind of experimenting with, different cuisines. But I truly believe that in terms of thinking about like criteria for a healthful diet, that we should be emphasizing like eating our cultural foods. And you have, organizations like Old Ways that has been doing some really powerful work in kind of, shifting people's attention and gaze towards like the foods that their ancestors ate as a way to, further support their overall health and well-being. And, recognizing that kind of pre-industrial food system, that so many of these diets at their core were like largely vegetable-based, very, very healthful, if you want to look at it like that. Can you talk about the role of individuals kind of like consuming the foods of their ancestors?
Oh, yeah, I'll try. So, well, yes, I totally agree that most ancestral cuisines are plant-based. That's just because that's what there was. And they and before industrialization, most grains were whole grains, right? So whole grains provide so much more nutrition, flavor, texture than refined grains that most people eat these days. And so looking back at those, you're just going to get a lot more nutrition without even having to think about it, without having to, overanalyze it, certainly without having to count calories too. So you're getting your nutrition, especially if you're getting foods that are, grown carefully and you're considering the source of your foods. But also there's probably a basis for saying that while I definitely enjoy eating the food of all cultures, many cultures, just for the diversity of it, there might be something to be said about we eat as individuals are genetically adapted to eating the foods that our ancestors ate. So in terms of looking at, things like diabetes, for example, and our ability to metabolize, certain nutrients, if we eat the way that our ancestors ate, we might actually do better health-wise. But that said, kind of looking more globally, all of our ancestors ate better than we do now, right? Before we had all this industrialized food. And so I think it's both a way of kind of it is getting back to our roots, discovering those flavors, but also being open to other people's cultural traditions and flavors as well, because any of those kind of, as you mentioned, primal cuisines are going to be healthier for you. And then by being open to other people's foods, you're just going to discover new flavors too.
Yeah. So I know that you are certainly in favor of, people primarily eating plants, but do you think that we should all be looking to convert to veganism? Do you think that that's the panacea?
You've opened up a very big topic here. So I believe that everybody really should eat more and a diverse set of plants. Everybody should. Should everybody be vegan? I don't think so necessarily. I think if people want to be and are careful about how they approach that, and again, eat real food, not the packaged vegan food, because that's not going to be any better for you than packaged anything else, right? Not all the time anyway. That's right for some people. It may not be right for others. Everyone's bodies are different. Everyone has different health issues, right? So it may not be right for everybody, but I think everybody should have as many plants as possible. And so I think, and then veganism versus a plant-based diet has different meanings too, right? There are other reasons besides health and nutrition that an individual may decide to eat mainly or only plants. That includes certainly the environment, orange sky. I mean, everybody should be eating fewer animal products so that we're going to avoid this kind of progression towards who knows what. So environmental and climate reasons. Ethical reasons are also another big one for people who, don't choose to eat any animal-based products. So it's kind of a question where, who am I to tell anyone what to do and the choices that they should make? I would just really suggest, yes, we actually know that from the science and from traditional diets that the healthiest diets include mainly plants.
See, thank you, Linda. I needed you to say that, because when I say it, sometimes people don't want to hear it from me. And, I agree. I think I can make arguments all day about the ethical, about the environmental, about the economic reasons for mainly eating a plant-based diet or embracing a vegan diet. But, it's not my role. I mean, look, you're a medical doctor. I don't have medical training, so it's certainly not my role to say vegan. That's the best diet for everyone. Everyone should be a vegan. And I always talk about the many factors that one should think about when, kind of figuring out the best diet. And I don't know how you feel about this, but, I often say that maybe a particular dietary model might be best for you for a period of time, and then maybe you need to transition to something differently. I guess I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on some of the, I don't want to reduce it to fad diets. Maybe we could, but just many of the kind of emerging diets or, older diets that people often lean towards quick weight loss, or, better metabolism. We could talk about everything from paleo to keto to macrobiotics. Do you have any thoughts about how we should be kind of approaching these different dietary models, and if we should just ignore them, or if it's worth experimenting with some to see how our body reacts?
I think we can't ignore them, right? Because people are really into fad diets. People are actually really interested in, I think, seeing a quick change and actually often making a big change and seeing what that does to their bodies. So I would say that, with certain exceptions, it's probably okay to experiment for a short time with any of these things, but the best way to do it would be with medical monitoring, right? Because you're going to know how you feel, but you're not going to know necessarily what it's doing to your body. And thankfully we have lab tests for that. We have vital signs that we can take. We can measure things, and I think it's important to do so, especially if somebody is going to embark on a very drastic change and eliminate entire food groups for a long time. So, and so short term, probably most things are okay, I think. But I really do advocate reaching out to registered dietitians and your medical provider to say, hey, look at me, look at what my conditions are, look at my medications. Is this going to be okay for me? Rather than just doing it because you read about it on the internet or whatever. But in terms of, what's good for our health overall, and if you're looking at weight loss, the diet that works is the diet that you can stick with. So I don't really like talking about diets in terms of a diet that you prescribed for a certain amount of time. I'm talking about diet kind of overall, like, what do you eat?
Yeah.
That's really what I want to hear. What do you eat? How do you prepare it? Where can we make a few small changes here and there that are going to work for you? Again, because I have no problem telling people what to do, but it's not going to work. So it's really better to hear, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? And how is that going to work in your life? That is something that is sustainable, and only those sustainable changes are really going to help people in the long term.
Yep. So one of the viewers wants to know if you have any opinions or thoughts on cooking with coconut oil.
So coconut oil, I think when it became popular and readily available several years ago, was touted as having all these miracle properties, right? At the end of the day, it's still a saturated fat. Any fat that is solid at room temperature is saturated fat. So like butter, for example, or lard. So you're not going to avoid that saturated fat part of it. And I don't really think that it has all the miracles that it was touted as having. But I will use coconut oil sometimes, and I'll use it for flavor. I think it has a really great flavor, very intense coconut flavor that you're not going to get from using either flaked coconut or coconut milk. And just a little bit goes a long way for that. And so, I am very much in everything in moderation, and sometimes not moderation, depending on the occasion or what I want to eat. So I would put coconut oil in that category of, it's still a saturated fat, and so don't go crazy with it.
Cool. So can we talk about Thrive Kitchen? Tell us, I'm interested to know, I don't think we've ever talked about the origins of it. What sparked your interest in getting this off the ground? How has Kaiser as an institution supported you, and what kind of impact has it had?
Yeah, well, sadly for now, for the pandemic, we've had to put it on hold. Your last class, when you were promoting Vegetable Kingdom, which was awesome, was the last one that we could do, because then the pandemic happened a few weeks after that. Yeah. So, but Thrive Kitchen, basically for the people who may not know about it, are these monthly cooking classes that I teach at Kaiser in San Francisco at Mission Bay, and that I founded in 2016. But before that, right, there's always a before story, the origin. For several years, I had been teaching some community-based cooking classes in anywhere where anybody would let me show up with my pots and pans and some food. So that included like libraries, recreation centers, et cetera, et cetera. But it started because, as I mentioned earlier when you asked me, I didn't learn about food and cooking in medical school. I've actually always loved food, just like you. I've always been a cook. I took my first cooking class when I was 7. But I thought of it as my hobby, right? I didn't think that it was something that I should bring into my work, because people weren't really doing that as doctors. And in 2012, I went to a continuing medical education course called Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives, which is an annual course, and it's co-sponsored by the Harvard School of Public Health and the Culinary Institute of America. So no exaggeration, 2012, I went to this conference and it changed my life. Like literally 1 week after that, I taught my first cooking class to patients, when I'd never taught cooking, aside from someone cooking with me in the kitchen. And the reason why was, when I went there and I had this great review of all the nutrition science, but also excellent food and excellent teaching by the CIA chefs. And, I realized why I was there. I was there so I could learn to be a better doctor, to educate my patients better about nutrition, to learn about nutrition more myself, and make it taste good. I was like, I can do this, and I should do this, because at that point I'd been a doctor for 10 years and I was starting to feel like I was writing a lot of prescriptions. And despite writing a lot of prescriptions, I wasn't reversing disease. I wasn't necessarily making patients feel better, right? It's not just the disease, but how people feel.
Yeah.
Right? And so I thought, I know that I feel better when I'm eating better. This is going to work for my patients too. And it was also kind of I'm a very creative person like you. And I felt like I needed that creative spark to kind of figure out a new way of doing things. So that's what I did. And so I did that for a few years, tried it out. And then I made the crazy decision to take a year off of being a doctor after all of that and go to cooking school. So I went to our wonderful San Francisco cooking school. And it was great. And I went there actually with a very specific goal. Well, three goals. One was I wanted to take some time off. But another was to learn to be the best cooking teacher I could be, and to also learn how to use flavor the best that I could. Because I knew, again, I already knew that that was the key to making this successful for patients and other people.
Yeah.
So I did that. I also did my certificate in plant-based nutrition then, because I wanted to, again, know as much as I could to share with other people. And then after that, I started working at Kaiser in 2016. And I pretty much pitched this idea. I said, hi, you don't know me because I was working somewhere else before. You don't know me, but I'm an experienced doctor and I've gone to cooking school and I've had a few years of teaching cooking to people under my belt. How about make a job for me? That's pretty much what I did. And I was very lucky. I found the right people, the right person who was like, hey, that's a great idea. Behind that, I sort of thought, which medical group would best understand this idea? And it was Kaiser, because for years I'd seen all those Thrive ads, which we still see everywhere. And I knew that Kaiser had pairing. And I thought, if they will have a farmer's market, they may want to actually take the next step, which is show people what to do with that food. And so that was how I kind of, got my eye on Kaiser. And they were building Mission Bay at the time that I was thinking about making a change. And so it just kind of, it all fell into place. Like all the preparation I'd done beforehand, it was the right place, the right time, like with everything else.
Yeah. I feel like when just hearing that story, it reminds me a lot of my story and bigger than the both of us, just this knowing that sometimes when there's a void, when there's a calling towards doing something that improves humanity, that improves your field, that improves whatever, sometimes you just got to do it. I think about when I first started doing this work, similar to you. I had gone to cooking school with this vision of starting an organization, and I literally was going out to community-based organizations, youth centers, faith-based institutions, and pretty much just offering to do these workshops for free, so that I could start to kind of build best practices, and everything evolved from there. And that was just one of those lessons that, you can wait around for the funding, you can wait around for approval, but why? Just do it. And then I feel like the resources and everything else will follow you.
Yeah. I mean, at some point I was feeling like maybe it never will, right? So I had been waiting for a few years on that. But I really don't regret it, because as you said, you learn through all your experiences. And so I definitely refined my approach to teaching. It used to be very complicated and I would have so much equipment and it was just really hard what I was doing. But all the different environments that I practiced teaching cooking in helped me figure out the best way to do it. And then, like you were saying, when you really believe in something, when you really are driven to help people, it doesn't feel like hard work, even though it is, right? And so, I just feel really lucky. And like when I was brought to that event where I got to meet you, that you put on at MoAD, the diaspora dinner a few years ago, they invited me, right? The Kaiser team that was there invited me because they wanted me to meet you, because they felt like we could put together some good community events. So I'm really looking forward to doing that even more once the pandemic is over. I've got lots of ideas. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, no, I feel like such kindred spirits, and I was so honored to meet you, because, I just feel like you're such a pioneer in this field. And I guess I'm wondering, what have you, done any work to help other medical institutions think about kind of replicating this model and, really putting some teeth behind, thinking about just everything I just feel like Kaiser is so on the cutting edge, with the farmer's market in a hospital, doing these cooking classes. I feel like the next step, which I wanted to ask you about earlier, is the kind of institutional food that they serve. Because, we often talk about the proverbial horrible hospital food. And I think people often feel like, what a contradiction. I'm in this place where I'm supposedly getting healing, but then they're feeding me stuff that is kind of diametrically opposed to what my mission is here, is to get better and to heal myself. So anyway, I'm interested. if you've seen interest or if other medical institutions have kind of started creeping towards including more cooking and fresh food into their models.
Yeah, you ask good questions, Bryant. You ask big questions, more than I can answer. But Kaiser is part of something called the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative, which is a group of a few dozen institutions that was an outgrowth of the Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives conference. And so these are places all over the country, some hospitals, some medical center, schools, and some corporations that are very interested in this and have teaching kitchens like the Thrive Kitchen is. Some even more developed than for sure than ours. So I think we are in a period that you're going to see this. I think 5-10 years from now, it's not going to be such a crazy idea that people in most parts of the country will have some familiarity with this idea. That's my hope anyway. Maybe 5 is too soon. Maybe it's more like 10. But in terms of my own approach to that, I feel like in all the work that I do, I want the word to get out there. And that's why I really like working with medical students, because medical students go on to residency training programs throughout the country. And I feel like in every group that I have taught, there's going to be at least one person, one of them, right, who's going to be interested in this, and they will go on because then, I've lit the spark. They see that, oh, that crazy idea that I had is not so crazy. Someone's already done it. Look at that. And they will do it wherever they're going. And so I think, slowly, one by one, people will inspire other people to do what I'm doing. I didn't invent this. I just kind of put my own spin on it. Mm-hmm. In terms of hospital food, that was a very good point. So when I was in medical school, the food that you could get outside of the cafeteria was fast food. I mean, McDonald's, places like that. That was really common. And not every place has gotten rid of those in their medical centers, just because, it is a comfort for people. It is inexpensive. I will acknowledge all of those things, right? When you're visiting your loved ones in the hospital, you may be someone who's craving that stuff, and it's cheap. But that's one issue. The other is, what are we feeding our patients when they're hospitalized? So Kaiser, in a few locations, including our own here in San Francisco, I helped put together a plant-based hospital menu, which you can request. So it actually was it was really interesting, so a lot of big hospital systems use like a centralized commissary where they prepare all their food that goes out. But you can make choices from those commissaries. And I was really surprised and really impressed when I was part of a small group that took on this project to see that the commissary that we were already using had tons of plant-based offerings. They just weren't being highlighted or ordered. And so we just chose some of those because it was easy to do. We weren't reinventing anything and made it into a plant-based menu. And so, one of my colleagues over at Kaiser, who's one of the hospital doctors, I know that he personally goes around with that plant-based menu to give to every hospitalized patient that he talks to. And just by making it an option, some people don't want that. Some people are like, you know what, I'm sick, I'm going to eat what I want to eat. And that's fine. We have a default, which may not be all plant-based. But for those who are like, hey, I did just have a heart attack. Oh, hey, I just had a stroke. Or, hey, I just had my cancer surgery. What can I do to guarantee that I can do the best that I can do on my own to get better? Then we have this as an option. And so I hope that will become widespread everywhere. But what it really takes is, even though I think a lot of people think the institution has to change, I actually think, yes, it does, but it starts with individuals. It starts with a passionate individual who really takes it upon themselves to say, hey, you're interested? Good. I'm happy to tell you what I know. And I'm happy to help you get where you want to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask you that because I think so often, as you know, when we talk about health and well-being, there's a lot of emphasis in our capitalistic culture around individual change. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, yeah, you should go to the farmer's market and buy fair trade or buy, whatever the prescriptions are. But I think that it does take changes in institutions. It does take changes in public policies. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the role of, people like you and me, not, in our professional lives, but just human beings and for everyone listening. Do you have any suggestions about the ways in which we can think about the role we can play as citizens, maybe in helping to change public policy? Think about the role that we can play as members or patients of these institutions, and kind of using our voice to push them in the right direction and change?
I think, like with anything, the individual voice does count. So whenever like a patient comes to me and says, this could be better, I'm like, write it, put it in a letter. I mean, institutions do like to hear about both complaints, what can we fix, and also praise as reinforcement. And so I think that is just like voting, right? Getting your vote out there about what you want. And if enough people do that, that eventually does make a change in the institution. I think, in how people choose to shop and where they choose to shop and put their dollars is another way of voting about what is the food that we want to have. And so I think there are so many different ways to be involved, but I think voting with your feet, voting with your dollars, all of that, and just speaking up, those are all, it applies to everything, all good ways of doing that. And then, like in my classes, when we have these meals together, I kind of love it when it's like the most resistant person who might have been dragged there by their friend or their partner or told to go to my class by their doctor because you need to get healthier, when they're like, wow, that tasted so good, or I can't believe that didn't have any meat in it. It has to come down to the experience. If someone experiences something and they enjoy it, they're going to change and they're going to suggest it to their friend, right? So that's the best way. It's both big and small changes, I think, that I want to help people make, So with my cookbook, which I'm really excited about and which is in its final stages of the editing and all of that right now, I kind of designed it for the people who can't come to my classes, right? My classes are small, they're in San Francisco. So there are a lot of people out there who might benefit and might be looking from these kinds of recipes to help themselves just kind of have more variety in the kitchen and get healthier. That was one of my motivations. Like, some of the recipes are things that I've taught my classes, but they're all kind of in the same theme of things that people can cook at home that are not going to be expensive and they're going to be tasty and easy for them to make. And so I think, like, I kind of want to do it all. I want to teach people in person. I want the people who can't come to my classes or who want more from what they got in my classes to have recipes that they can use at home. I have this actually big goal in the next step at Kaiser. I'm hoping, and I'll just put it out there.
Yeah.
I want to have a food pharmacy. Do you know what this is? Have you heard about this?
Oh yeah.
Food pharmacies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
can you explain to the party people
the
out
audience?
there?
Yeah. So, in San Francisco, the Department of Public Health already has food pharmacies. So the idea here is not just that we're telling people what to eat, but that we're actually giving them the food. And this is in partnership with the food bank, which I'm really, really honored to be on the board of. That's been recent this year. To give fresh produce to people who need it. So typically the people who get referred by their doctors to these food pharmacies are people who have some chronic condition, whether it's prediabetes, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease, any of these things, all of which, like all conditions, that can be improved by eating more vegetables. So that's one step. They get referred. They get food that is provided to them at no cost. So that takes care of the other part of leveling the playing field. Like, yeah, it can be expensive to eat the right food. So what do we do about that? Provide it to the people who need it. And then we tie that in with medical care. So they'll come there. My plan is, they'll come there, get a blood pressure check. They're going to get some sort of cooking demo and a tasting, and then some sort of follow-up plan to go back to their doctor about, hey, I need to ask more about this. What can I do here? And so, and then, I'll give out some recipes too. So that's the idea. We do all of it. We screen them. We sort of figure out what do they need help with because of their health conditions. We give them the food. We show them how to make it. We have them taste it so they feel like, oh, I like this. I could eat this. My kids would eat this. And it's kind of full circle. So that's my next big goal.
We're going to make this happen. We got to dream big. We got to step into these big dreams. So let me know whatever support I can lend.
Well, when I can bring in the famous Bryant Terry, that always helps.
I mean, I'm just a call away. I need to hook you up with my mother-in-law too. I don't know. Did I tell you she's the vice president of the Alumni Association at UCSF?
Yeah, yes, you did tell me when I saw you last time, right? That's pretty new for her, that role?
Maybe like a year, but I feel like there's some potential synergy between your work and some stuff she's trying to do too. So we'll make that happen.
That'd be great.
So I want to know more about the book. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I will let everyone know that I did write the foreword for your new book.
Thank you so much.
Because I believe in you. I believe in your message, and I want as many people to see this as possible. I think people need to see that there are rebels, if I could call you that, within the mainstream medical establishment. And so, yeah, I'm interested in just kind of like the origins of that. Had you always thought about writing a book? And, if not, when did that kind of emerge for you?
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for adding your words to it and gracing my book with that. It means so much to me. Yeah. And I thought you're, one of the most appropriate people, since we have so many shared ideas around food and health, to do so. I don't know that I had always wanted to do a cookbook, but when I started a food blog now 10 years ago, I just basically, since I've had that food blog for 10 years, I had so many recipes. So at one point I thought, it'd be kind of fun to write a cookbook. And my first obstacle was, I don't know how to write a recipe, but I figured that out. And then it, and then it was just like, oh yeah, I really do want to do this. I love cookbooks. I have overflowing bookshelves full of cookbooks, including yours, several of yours. And I just thought it's such a way of kind of encapsulating what you love about food and sharing it with other people. And again, I had this idea that I wanted to be able to just get my recipes out there to a wider audience. And so I think it just, a few years ago, after I think the final step was I went to culinary school. So I also felt very confident about what I knew and how I could teach people. So that's when I started to think about that. And so the last 2 years of my life, in addition to my life and working, have been putting together this cookbook, which, as you know yourself, is so much work. It's really a labor of love. But so my cookbook is mainly vegetarian with some pescatarian recipes. And again, it's spice focused, and it centers on 4 different geographic regions that I have either lived in, worked in, or have some other personal connection to, and also happen to either love spices or have a cuisine that is known to be really healthy. And so I start with home, California, and then there's another section on many places in Asia where I have lived, worked, and traveled, and where my family is from. My family is from Taiwan. And then I move on to the Mediterranean and the Middle East. That I chose because the Mediterranean diet, which is very plant-centric, is one of the healthiest diets that we know about. But also because I love the flavors and because of my time working in the kitchen at Mourad. So it all kind of made sense from that perspective. And then the last section focuses on recipes from Trinidad, where my husband is from. So people don't often think about Caribbean food as being, one, healthy, or 2, plant-based. But there are actually many recipes that at their heart are plant-based. And so I took it upon myself to convert the ones that weren't, and show people that yes, you can eat the food that you love, that you may not think of being as healthy as it could be, because I've that people are familiar with, and just kind of make them a little bit better for you, but without changing really the flavor or enjoyment of them.
Yeah. Speaking of your husband, and this is a little off topic, but he has been he's been in the public and helping us kind of navigate this current moment with COVID. You have any tips that you might want to share coming from him through you, or maybe just some that you have about just kind of, immunity health, taking care of ourselves? Obviously physically, but, mentally taking care of ourselves, just ways, radical self-care, if you will, in this crazy period that we're in.
So in this crazy period, now more than ever, your self-care means everything, right? Because all of those things that you can do will boost your immunity, and what we all have. So, what he talks about more is like wearing your mask, washing your hands. You all need to do all those things. You all should also get your flu shots. so that you avoid that other potential big respiratory complication as we come into the respiratory illness season. But in terms of what you can eat, well, let's talk about, before I get to the eating, other things you can do for yourself. You want to rest. You want to reduce your stress. You want to minimize your substance use or eliminate it entirely. You want to exercise. All these things are crucial for your well-being and your health, and really impact also your ability to have a good immune system. You know, let's take sleep for an example. Many people don't sleep enough. Sleep very directly affects your immune system. So that's a really important one. And that's always been something that is a challenge for me to make sure that I get enough of that. But then when it comes down to what you can eat, again, think of plants, because plants are where all the antioxidants are. Antioxidants are crucial in reducing inflammation and really in boosting your immune system. And so, you know, that includes, what's an antioxidant? So those are all the things that all those brightly colored vegetables and fruits, you know, we say eat the rainbow. Each of those colors corresponds to different antioxidants. So for example, beta carotene and all those orange colored things, pumpkin, carrots, squash. Those are important for your immunity and also in preventing heart disease. And then, you know, you have other like purplish pigments, those are called anthocyanins. Those are also play really important roles in reducing inflammation and all of that. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. So, you know, you can get that in your oranges. You can also get that in bell peppers. So some people really like to know like which vitamin goes in which fruit or vegetable. And that's great if people want to educate themselves on that. But even more so, just eat a wide variety. It's the easiest way to make sure you're getting a little bit of everything. And it's also tastier and, you know, more attractive. And I think having your food look good is also really important. One of the things I always talk about in my classes too is even if you're eating leftovers or even if you're just eating on your own, make it look nice on the plate. You don't have to necessarily get your tweezers out and garnish it like crazy, but make it look good because you deserve it. And make sure that you're eating well because you deserve it also. And so like I was saying, you asked me about COVID. It's crucial, actually. It's really crucial that you do get enough of these vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants to boost your immune system. Zinc is another thing that is important for immunity. And a lot of people don't get enough zinc. That's in seeds and nuts. And so a lot of people don't eat enough seeds and nuts, but in a plant-based diet, that's pretty crucial to get those in, both for nutrition, some healthy fats, and also texture and flavor.
So obviously, the cornerstone of a healthful diet is, you know, whole foods, mostly plants.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on supplements, multivitamins, you know, taking a zinc supplement to, and you know, help to ensure a strong immune system, vitamin C? Like, what are your thoughts about including those in an overall healthful diet?
So again, it's going to depend on the person, right? And their other health conditions and what medications they might need to take. In the ideal world, you get all of that from your diet if you have a well-balanced diet, et cetera, et cetera. Most people don't eat perfectly all the time. So I think you can think about supplements or even a multivitamin as insurance for when you're not eating that great. But you don't want to overdo it because like some multivitamins can have too much of certain things. That matters for some vitamins, not for others. Like, so you asked about vitamin C. Vitamin C is fine. And it's one of the vitamins which we have early evidence from a long time ago that, you know, can really help in boosting your immune system and in preventing cancer and some other things. And the good thing about vitamin C is that if you take too much, you're just going to excrete it. So no worries about getting overdosed on that. Zinc, as I said, can be hard to get in some people's diets. It is present in most multivitamins. I would caution, you can have too much zinc, actually. Too much zinc can lead to losing your sense of smell and taste, which would be so sad given everything that we're talking about. But I think, you know, so that's something to not overdo. Some people think the more the better. That's not necessarily true. Yeah. So I think in discussion with your healthcare provider is probably the best way to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So Linda, before we wrap up, where can we find you? Where do we go to learn more about you? Where can we start to pre-order your book? Where?
Oh, thank you. So, so since you see me here on Instagram, I'm at Spicebox Travels on Instagram. And my publisher's link for the book, Hesha is a publisher, is in my profile right now. So you can see the link there and find out more about it. It is actually available for pre-order now, although like we're still doing finishing touches on the cover and et cetera, et cetera. But I know that my friend bought 2 copies the other day, so you can buy it. So in all the places where you buy books. So, you know, on the internet, in all the usual places, Amazon, et cetera. I think it's available at Barnes & Noble, Target already, and soon to be many other places. I definitely believe in supporting your local bookstore, so that's not quite ready yet, but it will be. But it is available for pre-order, and my publisher is putting together some pre-order bonuses too. So those will be coming soon. So any of you who want to pre-order, that would be great. I would love that. So you can do that. And then it's coming out March 16th. So around the corner. It feels like so far away, but it's soon after this long journey towards it. Yeah, so I'm hoping that I will have lots of other announcements about it coming out soon. So besides Instagram, I'm at Twitter at Spicebox Travels. You can find me at the Doctor's Spicebox, one word, on Facebook, and also on my new YouTube channel. That's one of the things I did in the pandemic when we didn't have Thrive Kitchen. Although I have 6 videos on it. I need to make more. And then at Kaiser in San Francisco, which is a public website, if you look under our health education department, I'm actually helping put together a new lifestyle medicine website that will be under our health education department coming in the next couple of months, which will also have videos and a lot of other resources. So I encourage anyone, Kaiser member or not, to go there and take a look at that.
Cool. Well, whether virtually or in person, let's make sure we circle back and have a part 2 of this conversation when your book is published, so we could, just keep it moving.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bryant.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Once again, we have Dr. Linda Shiue, who joined us this week. I want to thank our sponsor, Kaiser, for whom Linda works. Kaiser's been our sponsor since we started the Chef in Residence program in 2015. So grateful for you seeing the vision and actually putting some